So in 1986, everything was going fine until my best friend, who was my first gay roommate, had moved off to San Francisco in the beginning of 1986. And in February of 1986, well, actually it was in March, he called me to say he was sick. And I thought, what do you mean? He said, it's AIDS. And I thought, you can't have AIDS. You know, first of all, the only people who get AIDS are people who are not like us. It's those other types.
Yeah.
You know, those who are just outrageously having lots of sex with people, the wild
houses,
people. Exactly.
All the, yeah.
Exactly. It's not us. And he said, well, it is me, because I've been diagnosed and I've been told I only have a few months left to live. So I'm going to go move home to North Carolina with my family. And I said, you can't move in with your family. They're born-again Christians. They're not going to accept you. They never accepted you before. They're certainly not going to accept you now. Well, they did in their own way, as long as he renounced being gay and renounced his lifestyle and gave his forgiveness over to God and got born again. Then they would let him live at home until he died a few months later, which I went out and visited him before he died, which was nice that I got to do that. But it made me realize, as I started to think about it, well, if he could have it, maybe I should get tested, because we're all telling people don't get tested because you know what they're going to do. They're just going to identify you and then send you off to some island.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's what they're recommending. Reagan's all about, you know, sending people off to some Caribbean island to, you know, just let's identify who has it and send them away.
You mean like a leper colony?
Oh yeah, exactly. No, that was how it was. Mm-hmm. Wow. And there was that much fear. Because like when you see that movie, The Normal Heart, you see the fear as it's growing, and you start to know people.
I don't know how's this spread? What happens? How do we do what? Yeah.
Yeah, and we didn't really know a lot of this stuff, and even the test was brand new, and so at least there was a test, because there hadn't been that for many years.
So when did you get? So you decided after?
So I decided
shingles?
that summer to get tested in the summer of 1986, expecting it to be negative.
Yeah.
And you get tested, and then you have to wait for several weeks. Mm-hmm. And I just put it out of my mind and came in there expecting to be told, you know, hey, you're fine.
Clean bill of health.
I said, yeah, of course. I'm from Houston. I live the right lifestyle, so I'm fine.
Yeah.
And he said, I hate to tell you this, but, and he was a doctor. He said, he just paused. He said, you've been diagnosed with HIV, and you might want to start thinking about your life, because right now, at 26 or 25 at that point, you're not going to see 30. So you might as well start planning. And also, as we were looking at your tests, we noticed your cholesterol level's a little high. You might want to look at that too.
I'm sorry, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the play?
How was the play? Yeah.
And
it's like, okay, I had some choice words to him.
I would hope so.
And I stormed out of there not knowing what to do. I mean, for the first time in my life was together. I was finally happy. I even had planned on, you know, I came out to my parents because I was in love. I wanted to share that news with my parents, and suddenly now I'm told I'm going to die, and die in probably the worst way possible. And I didn't really know where to go from this. And at least I had some friends who were involved. And one of my good friends, the one that I had started dating, that I'd fallen in love with, Bruce, was one of the people who helped to start AIDS Foundation Houston. And so when I shared the news with him, he said, well, we need to get more information. You need to know what's going on. You need to know what the facts are. And so he's the one who really led me to finding out more information. But one of the things I realized was, if I'm going to die in the next couple of years, I don't want to spend what will be probably 5 or 10 years of hard work building my financial business, my financial career.
Right.
So I decided that's done. I'm quitting that. And then didn't know what I wanted to do. But I did start volunteering for AIDS Foundation Houston. And then that led to me going back to school to work on my advanced psychology degrees. So I was going to the University of Houston Clear Lake and working on the hotline, and then I eventually became the director of the hotline. And then in 1987, they opened up funds for educators. And they said, would you like to be the first HIV educator to work with the gay community here in Houston? I thought, it's the perfect job to have for the next couple of years before I die. So I decided to take that on as my new career at that point.
And how were you physically? How did it physically impact you? Was there any physical manifestation or presenting?
No, there was nothing physically to tell me there was anything different from my body than I'd felt for the last 5 years.
Other than you have a death sentence.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that sometime soon it's going to happen. And so all you need to do was to check your T cells and see how those are doing. And as long as they don't fall below 200, your immune system is still roughly working. And so we just say keep doing that. And what medications are there? There was only one. That was AZT, and you take that medication. It generally destroys you before the disease does.
Right.
And so I said, I'm not considering that, so there was no treatment. Essentially, I would just say, well, I guess I just have to help people as best I can until I die. And that was my plan. So that's what I did for the next couple of years, was try to help people as best I can. And then it was very, very quickly after that, especially working at the AIDS Foundation, I'd known hundreds of people who were sick, dying, and helped them to go through that process.
And help them to go through a gracious death, as gracious as it could be?
Oh, well, so many parents and society wouldn't treat people. Hospitals wouldn't accept people for the longest time. You know, if you had AIDS, they said, you go someplace else you can get treatment. We're not taking that risk, especially when they thought they didn't know how it was spread. Even though, even in '86, we were pretty clear, this seems to be bloodborne. And, you know, it's blood, it's semen, it could even be some vaginal fluids. We're not absolutely sure, but definitely if there's any blood in those fluids, there's risk.
Yep.
Well, then it's like, well, what if you were bleeding from your mouth? Could you kiss somebody? Could you share a spoon with somebody? What's the possibility of that? It's possible, but not in any way likely. But
it doesn't matter. It gets into our head.
Exactly. And society was panicked about that. And there were plenty of people who wanted to say, you can't prove you can't pass it that way, so I don't even know if I can touch you, much less, you know, be close to you in any way.
Yes.
And there were families who just threw people out of the home. You know, they wouldn't take care of them. Hospitals wouldn't. And so
and you
the
saw
gay
all
community
this in Houston, because Houston is a it's the fourth largest city in
one of the
largest,
country. Definitely. And we realized in the gay community, we had to take care of our own because there was no one else to do it. And so during those years, we learned to become these agencies that now exist who have these services. We developed those services through the work we did because there was no choice. The government gave us little to no support, and society definitely didn't do that. So we had to learn this all on our own.
So were you part of the, like Liz Taylor, and who was really pushing for funding for the AIDS research and all? So was that part of your?
Well, that was part of it. I mean, I was involved with ACT UP. I was involved with AIDS Foundation Houston. I was an activist to a point, but I'm also a professional at that point, so I have to be careful about how far I go. You know, do I get myself arrested? Because I loved what ACT UP would do sometimes, because sometimes you have to tell society, if we have to fight back to get some rights, we will fight. And they were willing to fight.
Sure.
They were the perfect agency for that.
But were you in corporate training at that time? Had
No,
you begun
no.
to develop that practice? How were you making your living?
Oh, I was at this point from 1987 for the next 12 years. I was an HIV professional.
Got it.
So I was then an HIV
And
educator.
were you getting the national attention? Were you getting a chance to go around and do national spots and the work that you were doing?
Mostly it was Texas. So I was very involved in the politics
Well,
of
hell,
AIDS
it's the
in
nation
Texas.
of Texas. For God's sakes, we think of ourselves, is it?
Well, there were plenty enough good people in other parts of the country doing work too. We were all working together. And yes, I knew the people from, you know, LA AIDS Project, Gay Men's Health Crisis in New York. Yeah, I was working with all of those people.
So what was it teaching you about yourself during this time, and your own healing and healing through this process of becoming much more of a resilient, continuing using your resilience to be who you are and to grow yourself emotionally and spiritually and being more kind to yourself, as we were talking about before?
Well, I wasn't as good at being kind to myself, but I was able to throw myself into being kind to others and help others so much.
That's the first
and
spot.
give back to
Yes,
others.
exactly.
And so my job, I was focused on, I've got to help other people who literally have no one else helping them. And even though it's helping them to die, I'm there to be there through that process and support them.
We all do. We're all going to get there.
And I went through at least 100 personal deaths, and then I had several hundred friends die. I mean, we used to go to funerals at least once a week or more. And we would have to decide which funeral to go to. Sometimes, well, I don't know, there's 2 of them today, which can we go to? Or, we've got 3 funerals today, but you would go there to honor your friends, and people are dying all around you. By the late 80s, it was just an everyday thing. And you were just waiting for which is gonna be the day when my turn comes. And when Bruce, the man I was telling you with that had helped start AIDS Foundation Houston, and when he got sick in 1991, I had no idea how quickly he would go, but at a certain point he'd been so ill for so long, and he was one of the most beautiful men I'd ever met, and he had gone from that to having the KS lesions all over his skin and having blistering and just horrible, losing he used to work out and look great, and then now he's like a stick, and everything he identified about himself, which is what I did for myself too. When I started working out, I built up my self-esteem based on what I looked like.
Exactly.
And now I've got a disease that's going to have me look like one of these walking cadavers. And who would I be at that point, and could I deal with that? Or would I just kill myself when that happens? I don't know. And so having to find those answers during that period, and then going through Bruce's illness, and when he died, and how horrible that was, and then meeting Les and being in love again, and everything was going great for about almost 6 months of dating, and then suddenly he was diagnosed with AIDS. And then just a few months later, he got a brain disease, which was like Alzheimer's, except it happens within weeks instead of years. And within just a few weeks of us moving into the house that we had built together, he died a horrible death. And so I'm just waiting for, when is this going to happen to me? And in the meantime, going to seminars to help deal with this. And that's probably why I learned a lot about growth, is I did go to a lot of seminars, and helping other people also learn about death, dying, how do you prepare for it, legally, psychologically. And I think I learned more about death and dying from that period that is a great gift to me now, because I don't fear death in any way. I could die tomorrow, and it's like, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Gave it what we have.
Yeah, and I have a clear idea of what's going to happen afterwards, and I've had a near-death experience even, so I know what that experience is going to be, and realize it's not any different than anyone else's near-death experience. If they've truly had one, you've almost always heard it's an incredibly positive experience, nothing negative. And so I don't fear death or fear what's going to happen afterwards. I'm more, and I don't say afraid, but I'm more concerned right now with, how do I learn to get better at living in the moment?
Thank you. Because that is our opportunity.
And that's the biggest lesson I think I got out of all of this, is that you don't know what the future is going to be. I never assumed I was going to live to see 60, and next year I'm going to be turning 60. I was told I'd be dead before I was 30. So to be at this point and think, wow, maybe I should have done a better job saving money. But the whole point is I never planned to retire, because I do something I'm passionate about. And as long as I can speak, I will always be teaching what I'm teaching, because I love that. And I don't care who's my audience. But what I want to do is to find people where I can touch their lives in a way, if I can just give them a little bit of what I've learned and help them walk away with some more clarity and a way to follow their own paths that's going to make them happier and more successful in their own minds.
Yes.
That's all I want in life, is just to help people to be a little happier.
And your resilience is something that's so, I mean, look at what you've been through. Look at the experiences that you've been through, but there is such a resilience to your consciousness and your personality.
Well, people will ask me sometimes, well, why you? How did you make it and other people didn't? I can't tell you that. I had friends. Who did AIDS the right way. They meditated. They were so spiritual. They were so much at peace. They did all the right things. They ate the right foods. They tried all the experimental stuff. They did it all, and yet they still suffered and died. And I said, there's no one reason or not as to why it happens. You don't question that in life.
No.
Life is just life.
Isn't that the truth? Well, so all right. So what are you working on in Bart now? What inside your consciousness are you working on as a growth exercise? As the places that you want to grow?
The most important one I'm working on today, and I'm always working, shaping certain things in my life, but the one I've found is the most important is the key to all life, which if you ask anyone, what do you want out of life? Almost every person will answer it this way, or if you guide them this way, they'll go, oh my gosh, that's it. That's the one thing I want, which is people just want to be happy.
Yeah.
Or at least more happy with their life. I want to be a little happier in my life. I want to be able to say, I left this life and it was worth it. This trip on this earth, this short period of time that it is, was worth it. All the ups as well as the downs.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't have the downs, how do you even know what an up is?
You don't have contrast. You have no idea as to what it is. Yes.
And life has neither ups or downs. It just is. And today what I'm trying to do more than anything else is find a way to live in the now, which of course is the thing you hear from everyone today. But it took me almost 60 years to get to this point of how much of my life, I've certainly learned not to regret the past. Whatever decisions I made in the past, they were the past.
Yep.
And I wouldn't be the person I am today had I not had those experiences, however painful they might have been.
Thank you.
But I also have lots of moments of joy in my life. And learning how to take those moments and celebrating those, because they're special moments, but they're also brief, because the moment you have that moment of joy, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to change.
Sure.
And whether you like it or not, it's how life is. So don't just, once you get to this moment and say how sweet it is, yeah, but could be nicer. How is that celebrating? And so I noticed in my life in the last couple of years that I have this idea that life should go a certain way.
Yeah.
If I'm taking a flight, like tomorrow I'm going to be working in Oklahoma for the next week and I've got to go to several cities, I have a flight to catch at a certain time. That flight should leave at a certain time because I paid for that flight.
Damn right.
It needs to get me there. It needs to happen a certain way. What's the chance that it might not? Pretty good, because things in life rarely go exactly the way you plan.
Right.
But usually when it doesn't go according to plan, I tend to get stressed, upset, throw a tantrum, whatever it is. I'm going to make this into what it should be.
Exactly.
When it's out of my control. And what can you do about something that's out of your control? Well, by definition, you can't do anything about it. It is what it is, as my mother's favorite saying.
And that is where I think is the beauty of the Serenity Prayer. Because it starts with, the beginning of it is, give me the serenity first. I want that serenity first, because there are things that I can change.
And what will make you serene, though? Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. It's the only choice you have. But how many of us don't accept it? We want to fight it.
Well, that's why I have to do the prayer 1,000 times a day if I can just begin to do it. I know that is really the key. Acceptance is the key to the solution to all of my problems. Is that acceptance? Is acceptance the way things are at this given moment?
Well, and the second part of that is the courage to change the things that I can, which means you have to take your focus off of what's out of your control, calm yourself down, because when your emotions are high, you can't think clearly. You got to calm yourself down and think, what is under my control? What are my choices here?
Exactly.
You may not like all the choices, but those are your choices, not
Exactly.
that. That's not a choice. Let that go and focus on these. And then to have the wisdom to tell the difference is the key. Because you can make choices, and that's the outcome of your life, is in the choices you make. You can't blame life. You can't blame other people. If you're making choices, you're completely responsible for the outcome in your life. So if you're not happy with that outcome, make different choices. And yet people won't let go of this. No, I want this.
Yep.
You're not getting that. Let that go. That is just what it is. I didn't want to be gay. It is what it is. I can learn to accept that and make the most of it, or I can fight it like some people do. I am HIV positive. I may always be HIV positive. But today we have medications that as long as you take medications, your immune system may never be depleted. And if your immune system is never depleted, you never get sick from anything. So you can be just as healthy. Now I have to deal with the problems that older people have. So I never thought I would have to live to deal with those old age problems. Hearing issues, eyesight. You know, now I've got some problems with my joints. I had my hip replaced. I've had my heart worked on. I never had to deal with those problems before. But it's like, well, but that's life.
Yep.
And I may only be around another 10 or 20 years, which is likely. I mean, how long do people live? Not very
Right.
long. But it also may only be another day.
Yep.
And if so, it's okay, because I regret nothing. I've learned much, and I still want to learn more and teach more. And I would love to get to that point where every day in life, I can just accept life on its own terms.
Thank you.
And find those moments where when life goes the way you want it to go, take time and celebrate that. Have some joy for it. Because what I
Thank you.
typically have done was say, well, when things go the way I expected, my response is, well, that's what I expected.
Yeah.
Well, what joy is there in that? So instead, take a moment to celebrate those precious moments when life is at its sweetest. Those
Thank
little
you.
moments when you see a beautiful flower, like this morning, we were at the Pond Society tour, and at our house, which was on the tour yesterday, in one of the ponds, they have these beautiful water lilies, and there was a lily I saw poking its head up. I said, in the next couple of days, that's going to come up and open, but it's not open today. And this morning, as we're leaving to go see some other ponds, ours was open and beautiful. And at that moment, we just stopped, just take a moment to look at it and wonder that. Now, it wasn't open so everyone could see it yesterday, but it's here now.
Yeah.
And take that moment to just take in that joy, because that's life.
That's you know, when the Buddha, after he had experienced enlightenment, and they came and they asked him, well, what do you do the day after that? You chop wood and you carry water. And that's what you're talking about. Because if any moment is sacred, then all moments have to be sacred. They cannot be. The universe would spin out of control if that weren't true.
They are sacred as they are.
As they are. That's the point.
But the bigger point is, what's your choice?
Thank you.
And your choice is, do you choose to see it? And when you see it, like my favorite thing to teach people is, you first have to notice it. If you don't notice, it just passes you by.
Yeah.
That precious moment. The next thing is, you've got to own it.
Yep.
You know, it's like, what choices can I make here? And out of those choices, you can have any result you want. But if you want the best result, out of that clarity and looking at these choices, and because we have this in our brain, this prefrontal cortex, we can think about all these scenarios and decide, what's going to be the best choice for the outcome I want in my life? I can't control the outcome, but I can constantly make choices to move in a direction that makes my life happier, sweeter, more satisfied. And that's how I want to live in my life, so that whenever it ends, even, you know, I'm having lots of shoulder pains now. That doesn't mean I'm going to stop working out, even though it's harder to do.
Sure.
But I also know it's part of keeping up this body. If I stop doing that, I'm going to really start feeling, I take care of this piece of mechanics.
Don't you do that with your car?
Exactly.
And
if you can't replace your car, actually I did have my hip replaced, but you can't replace your whole car.
Yeah.
Well, you can, but we can't replace us.
Yeah.
Not at this point. We can replace pieces, but you can also take care of it so it lasts longer. And accept the fact that that's true. I don't work quite as well as I did 10 years ago. My body's not the way it was, but it still works well.
It does, but who are you, though, that you are now 10 years later, that you bring so much more to the table than you did 10 years ago?
Yes, as we look in the mirror and we see these wrinkles, and say, oh, I shouldn't look like that. I said, this is the look of wisdom.
It is.
It's the look of experience. It says, you have lived, you have learned. I sometimes have people who are in their 20s who say, look, I'm now 21, you're almost 60, we're the same though, we're both adults.
Yep.
So, no, we're not the same.
Yeah.
I have a lifetime of experience, of lessons I've learned, that you have quite a road to follow. You've got a lot to go through in life before you get to here. But, that is all life. It's all about the experience and exploring it in every way possible, and learning to, as I teach people, life is about that roller coaster ride.
Sure. Well, it is, but let me ask you about something, Bart, do you talk about the concept of what is enough?
I think it's important to realize that could not whatever you have today be enough for today? Well, one thing is, it is what it is. You're not going to have what you wanted, you have what you have. Could you not enjoy that moment?
Yeah. What am I leaving on the table?
instead of thinking my life has to get here before I'm happy.
Then I'm going to win. Don't worry. Once I get that, then I'm going to go ahead and then I'm going to relax. And then
Wouldn't life be sweet then?
Yeah. Yeah, but that is not what we're going to do. That's not what we're having.
And you may not get that choice to have life get to that level of sweetness at some point in the future. You only have today. And can you make the most of that? And that's what I'm working on most in my life. Because, as I said, life is like a roller coaster. I mean, do you ride the roller coaster this way? Oh, I'm not getting on there. Well, no, life says you got to get on there.
Yeah.
And you're going to have, but how do you enjoy that ride even if you're forced on it? Do you do it this way?
Yeah.
Or do you do it this way?
Exactly.
I kind of think life is more about this and
Just
enjoying it.
Exactly. And if you can do that, if you can give that, if you can give that time, if you can give that moment to be able to accept and see, what are we doing here that's fun? What are we doing here that's exciting? What are we doing here that's valuable? What is it doing? What am I doing here that can contribute something?
And looking at what your choices are and saying, well, I have a variety of choices of how my day could go. What choices do I want to make that's going to add to my happiness or satisfaction in my life? Yeah.
And I find that my internal world is a really good mirror of my external world. So that if I am coming up against all kinds of blockages and people or problems and their annoyances, there's something going on in here. And that if I can be more peaceful in here, suddenly things seem to change in the outside world. I mean, it's like very much my world is built inside out.
And you had asked me, well, what do you do to treat yourself more kindly?
Precisely.
And I'd thought about that book that I'd read by Pollard years and years ago called Self-Parenting, which teaches transactional analysis. And most people are familiar with that. It's your inner child, your inner parent. You know, you struggle with this. Your parent is always telling you, you need to get up, you need to go to work, you need to stay focused, you need to earn money, you're just constantly beating up on ourselves. We're just not good enough. And I said, well, imagine if you had a child, is that how you want to treat your child?
Thank you.
You're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not young enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not this, you're not that. And it's like, you are who you are and you're perfect as you are. And as a parent, you would tell your child, you are wonderful. You know, how should parents treat their children? You want to let them know you have unlimited possibility.
Yep.
That you are perfect just as you are. You have your own challenge, your own skills. You may not be this, but you have that. Make the most of that, of those gifts. But how often do we say that to ourselves and treat our inner child with that level of love?
And that's what I'm asking. That's what that is really the big key in my life right now, is doing exactly that.
Well, the first thing you have to do is you've got to notice when you do it.
Yep.
And then, of course, if you're doing it, are you making choices that's resulting in this, you know, the way you're treating yourself? Are you telling yourself things that are loving and supportive?
Yep.
Or are you beating yourself up for not being enough?
Exactly.
And what good is there in beating some child and saying, you're not good enough, as if that's going to make you want to get better? Well, that's what builds you into a strong personality. You got to beat yourself up because you got to beat other people up.
Yep.
Well, would you beat up a child to get them to be good enough? Maybe 100 years ago, that's what some parents were taught. You've got to beat these children into submission because that's how you make a successful child.
Exactly.
And it didn't work then. It doesn't work today.
No.
You've got to teach them and support them and be the most loving support, because we're not often our best loving support.